Good. It's always great to see the Taiwan Film Festival back in Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, and Canberra this year, from the 28th of July to the 13th of August. And it's my great pleasure to again be talking to the festival director, Benson Wu, and to Helen Stenbeck, who is the festival coordinator, programmer, whatever. Welcome
Yeah,
to the
yeah.
metropolis. All right. Now, first, I always am intrigued. What's the state of play with the Taiwan film industry?
Benson, do you want to start?
No, you go for it. I'll let you do it.
Oh, okay. So at the moment, I think for our film festival, we usually would have a selection of films that is we observe from what has happened in Taiwan, and usually we'll pick the films that are from the award ceremonies that are the winning films. And this year, from my own understanding, we have a lot of upcoming new directors from Taiwan, and the film that is going to be happening on the opening night, which we are all very excited. It's won the what's the award that has won, Benson? Is it a
So
was it
it
the
was
best?
nominated for Best Script Writing at the Golden Horse Award last year. I think it
Mm.
won the Best Supporting Actress. And then this year, at the Taiping Film Award is nominated for another 7 category, including like Best Script and Best Director. So pretty exciting. Yeah.
And which film is that? Is that Goddamn
Oh,
Monsieur?
yes, that's
Exactly.
right.
Yes.
It is got, yes, I've had a chance to look at that. It is a really interesting film. And tell me more about it, because it has a sort of sliding doors sort of
Yeah.
aspect to it. I
Yeah.
picked that up as it progressed, but a really interesting, well
Yeah.
constructed story.
Yeah.
What made you decide to select it?
I think when we first watched this film, to be honest, we didn't really have expectation as well, because this film didn't really travel around the world or even in the film festival industry. So when we look at it, we're like, wow, this is really good. Like the way it colored the whole thing, the neon line, it really reflects to a lot of like the 80s or the 90s Edwin Yan or Ho Xiaoqian's films color style. And then the script writing is just so clever, it's multi-layered, sort of different universe, everything can happen, that sort of story narrative. And it's edited so cleverly, it makes sense, and then it keeps you entertained the whole time, but then at the same time it's really artistic as well. It's just powerful film. I really enjoyed it. And then so we were like, oh, this is and I also really enjoyed the ending. I don't want to spoil it, but I think the ending gives a kick in a good way, especially this kind of topic, because it's all about gun violence, about teenage shooting, which is happening a lot, especially this year and last year around the world. I think it's really quite daring for us to choose this one as the opening film, because without it's actually a chance to raise awareness, a different angle to look at the issue rather than the gun control. But we can also look at how people next to you is really sometimes just lack of attention to, ask them, how are you? Are you doing okay? Just reconnect with the human being and to avoid this kind of violence to happen. So I think that's what the message of the film that brings out, and without it's powerful. Yeah.
Something that I want to add on is that often that a lot of Taiwanese films are really centered in the family melodrama, which I think most of the time that the Chinese films that does very well. And with this Goddamn It Asura, there's a commentary about human loneliness, and also perhaps a lot of Asian diasporas will watch this film in Australia. They can kind of resonate with the family pressure. Like, of course, again, that we don't want to give out too much spoilers, but we also see a lot of friendship, and also it kind of combined with a lot of, for example, the animation. We will see something very new, possibly in the next generation of film industry, for the film productions, that we will be seeing a combination with animation and live actions together. I just thought that this film we selected for the point, I think, apart from the action that we're seeing through the film, there's a lot of symbolism of like coming of the age, youth anger, a lot of presence of the adults, and I think just a lot of emotion that is packed in with in one film. So I
Mm,
think it will be very exciting for our audience in Australia.
for sure.
I agree. It's a really well-made film, and I was
Mm,
wondering about how much the Taiwan film industry supports filmmakers like this filmmaker for Goddamn Asura, so
mm,
that films like this, using animation, using other
mm.
pretty strong production values, can be made.
Mm. I don't know how much they support. That's probably the question to the director or the producer. But I do know, like at the end credit, I think they do get a bit of funding, probably from Taipei City government, the local council. But overall, the funding, I'm not 100% sure. Yeah. So that's the question, because the director and the actors will actually be coming to the festival in Sydney and in Melbourne. So we will have a Q&A, so people can ask that question after the Q&A.
Very good, excellent. All right, now I'm particularly focusing on the 30th and 31st of July in Melbourne, even though of course it's in the three other cities that we've talked about. And in Sydney, of course, the festival is much broader. You have a wider range of films. And I noticed in Sydney, for example, you're playing one of my favorite films, Yi Yi, a One and a Two. What a great film
Yes,
that is.
that's such a classic Chinese classic movie. Yeah.
Yeah, we want to do like a retrospective Edwin Yan's film this year, but we realized actually Melbourne Film Festival did it just not too long ago, I think 2019 or 2018, and they literally screened everything in Melbourne. So we thought a little bit too close for us to play again in Melbourne. So we actually just sort of narrow it down a little bit to the two film that hasn't been, especially Taipei Story hasn't really been screened in Australia a lot. So we were bringing that to Sydney and Brisbane. Yeah.
Yep, no, that's fair enough. I absolutely understand that. The other film I've had a chance to look at is a documentary about Iramoy Island, I think it is, where mining occurred from 1886 to 1945, called Green Jail. A very interesting story, which I knew, of course, very little about. Tell me
Mm.
about that film.
I, that's sort of my guilty pleasure is my personal favorite one when we were programming it. And that's like, I give like 10 out of 10 for that film. It's exactly for me, that's the story I'd never heard of before. I'd never heard my grandparents talk about it. I didn't know. I mean, we knew child bride exists in Asia and in Taiwan as well during that time before World War II or just after World War II. But this is quite unique how this grandma was actually married to Japan, but then also and then sort of kind of stuck on the island, but then at the same time she sort of choose to stay on the island even though it's so isolated. And you just so really interesting, fascinating watching that sort of observational documentary, how you watch her action, but she has all this sort of emotion from high to low, but then she still stay on the island even though she's lonely. It's like, oh, how interesting. And it's sort of hybrid documentary as well. It's got this and it's not animation but like experimental style, showing the ghost from World War II and then combined with the current location. I just thought that's just such a clever idea to do it. It's fun, you know. It's sort of quirky. I was like, oh, why are you doing that? But then I was like, yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I thought it was powerful. Yeah.
I think Green Gel really explores the ideas around identity. You know how we, with our current society, especially for us as Asian diasporas, sometimes we ask ourselves, where is home? Like, where do you belong? And I think Green Gel has taken into like a kind of a conception of like a third culture where you see a grandma that is from Taiwan, but she has been adopted into kind of like a Japanese society, but at the same time, it's a very remote island of Japan. So she doesn't feel like she's belonged anywhere. And, her fate is just seen through the lives of her father being the miner and all the chaos around the post-war period. And also, the director juxtaposed with another character, the young guy. I don't know, Peter, if you have seen the film, a young guy which lives next to the grandma.
Yep.
And that kind of like the juxtaposition kind of feels like, oh, there's also a displacement for both characters, but they have end up in the same island. You know, it's just like kind of talking about the fates of two people who are generations apart. Yeah, so it's a very interesting, and I don't know if it's an uplifting documentary, but it's certainly something that hasn't the story that we never heard before. You know, the history that the part of the history that has always not been voiced out. So a rare story is always something that we like to pick for our documentary.
Yes, I really found it interesting. The contemporary footage of the Iriomote Island, I think is the way it should be pronounced, and the attempt to build a jetty or something like that, and no one really wants it. What intrigued me was I would love to have seen more archival footage, if any existed, about the island, because it sounds like a fascinating experience, not necessarily a good one, for the the miners who work there.
I agree.
Yeah.
That's another question we can ask the director when he's here.
That's just something that happened 2 days ago. I was watching a Q&A presented by the director. It was a video he recorded, and he talked about that he went through the archives in Japan, and also he went to done the research with a lot of Chinese historians as well. That part wasn't really recorded. It was a very limited record that they kept due to because of the remoteness of the island, and also it's just something that when people was trying to survive, no one really thought about keeping records, unfortunately. Yeah.
I think in the documentary also mentioned about when her family, the grandma's or family parents, when they first moved to Taiwan or to Japan, I think they had to burn all their photo and all the records to erase their past and stuff. So that probably make it extra harder to have more archive footage, but it'll be interesting to see. Definitely would be interesting.
Very interesting. Yes, no, I understand. If the footage isn't there and so on, it's yeah, absolutely. And of course, the Japanese oppression of people during that World War II is quite incredible, and that's just another story of it.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay, well, we only have a few minutes left, so let's talk about some other films you'd like to recommend for the Taiwan Film Festival.
Helen, do you want to do Deepest Uprising? Your favorite.
I actually want to recommend The Terrorizer, which is slightly similar to Goddamn Asura. It's kind of exploring human loneliness, but that movie is such a cinematic experience. I think it's packed with actions, it's packed with not so much as a political correctness kind sort of film, unfortunately for me, but I think the storyline, the plot, and kind of injected with a bit of queerness within it. So I would recommend Terrorizer. I think that was one of the films that was nominated for a category in Golden Horse Award in Taiwan as well. Yeah.
Okay, very good. And Benson, what about you? What else would you like to recommend?
The other one, my favorite, is also a documentary, is Taipei Dad, New York Mom. It's by the director called Milky Chen. It's actually an unfinished documentary autobiography by himself. Unfortunately, he passed away in 2018, before he was able to finish the film. So he got his best friend so before he passed away, he actually told his best friend, who was the editor, to say, "Oh, can you edit the film for me?" So this sort of that request was taken on even he passed away. But the editor didn't want to take away the original editing what Milky Chen has done. It's just a powerful coming out story about himself coming out as gay, and then having a falling off relationship with his father, and then moving to America, and then coming back to China, this kind of migration identity. So sort of a migration identity clash with the parents, but at the same time, the gender identity clash. Yeah, so it's a very, very powerful documentary, even though it's unfinished. And I watched it a few years ago, 2019. So really lucky this year we can partner with the Taiwan International Queer Film Festival. So we were able to finally track down the family who owns the copyright of the film and allowing us to play it. So yeah, really glad this film will be playing 4 cities. So highly recommend it.
Sounds like a really interesting collection of films. We can't cover them all, but certainly in Melbourne, it'll be on at the Jam Factory 30th and 31st of July, Saturday and Sunday. So look, congratulations on the Taiwan Film Festival. It's always good to see these films because otherwise we wouldn't. So that's the importance of these film festivals. Benson and Helen, thank you so much for talking with me.
Thanks so much,
Thank you
Peter.
for having us. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Oh, is it still recording?